How many of you are relatively new pool owners, say less than a couple years of experience? Uh-oh, this is the advanced class. No, I'm teasing. We're gonna keep this pretty short and sweet. It's not very complicated to winterize a pool. Sometimes people think that it is. It's not very complicated. We really have two goals. We wanna make sure the pool doesn't turn into the green monster, right? So that you open up the pool next spring and it's crystal clear, we don't have green algae, you don't have to spend weeks and a bunch of money cleaning it up. And the other thing we wanna make sure of, we wanna prevent freeze damage. That's the other kind of key, is you never know in the Northwest if we're gonna, we always seem to get that week or two of super cold weather. And so we need to make sure that we don't have any freeze damage. The things that tend to freeze in pools in the Northwest are if the water's not running in the pump and the filter. Obviously when water freezes, it expands and that's when it breaks stuff, so we'll talk about that at the end. A couple of questions just so I know how to kind of detail this. How many of you use just like traditional chlorine in your pool? Chlorine tablets, sticks? Couple of everybody? So that'll make it easy. Types of filters, how many of you have cartridge filters on your pools? And how many have sand? Oh man, this might go from a half-hour class to a 15-minute class. No, but it is probably gonna last about a half hour depending on questions. So let's get started. But that's gonna make it pretty easy because we can keep everybody on. Won't have to go into all the different types of systems. So I kind of went over the goals. We want to make sure the pool is crystal clear when you open up next spring. No bacteria, no algae. Want to protect the pool surfaces, the equipment, to some extent the plumbing lines. Do we have any above ground pool owners? Okay, above ground pool, so we'll talk a little bit. Frankly, the freeze damage protection is a little bit easier on an above ground pool, so we'll talk about that at the end. Then an in-ground pool, it's quite a bit easier to prevent issues there. This is what we want to avoid, right? Yeah. Anybody ever had this? I mean, probably sometime somebody's had it, and just as kind of a heads up, if you ever start to see the pool turn green, whether it be during the winter or the summer, get on it right away. It's one of those things that it just gets progressively worse. The water will get cloudy, then it gets green, it gets greener, then it gets to the swamp stage, and it just progressively gets more expensive and more time consuming. And so this is really what we wanted to prevent from what happens during the winter, is especially when we get some nice weather in like February or March, the water starts to warm up. That's when bacteria and algae start to grow. So I'll talk a lot about how to keep an eye on your pool next spring so this doesn't happen. What we kind of use as the rule of thumb is when it's time to winterize your pool is really based on the water temperature. When the water temperature gets below about 65 degrees, anybody check the temperature in their pool recently? What was it?
Well, I have a heater. We have a heater, so it's.
Oh, you're keeping it going.
Yeah, right now, yeah.
Yeah.
Today's the last day, though.
Okay. And so when the water drops down below 65 degrees, that's the best time to winterize your pool. Up until then, is anybody that doesn't have a heater or not heating their pool know what their temperature is? What was
I
your?
don't know the temperature though. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. But so a couple of the other classes we did this week, people were saying the temperature was still around 70 degrees, even if they didn't have a heater on the pool. So we're getting close. Usually the middle of October to the end of October is the best time to winterize the pool. The reason being is the products that we're gonna put in last a lot longer when the water is cold. That's kind of the basis. And we also recommend that when the water starts to warm up next spring, gets above 65 degrees, that's a good time to open the pool. Or at least, I mean, probably none of us are gonna swim at 65 degrees unless you have some brave children.
Kids,
But yeah, the kids might.
Yeah.
no, actually, my uncle really likes swimming in like November.
Does he? Okay.
Polar club. Yeah.
And so when the water temperature gets above 65 degrees, open the pool up, get it, make sure it's clean. Not gonna take much effort because the water's still pretty cool. The key is keep the chlorine in the proper range, keep the pH in balance until you're ready to use the pool, whether that be Memorial Day or the 4th of July. Also, we don't want to cover up any problems. So if the pool's already a little bit green, cloudy, we want to fix those problems before we close the pool up. So once we get to that point where we're ready to close the pool, 65 degrees, in fact, you can even start this process now. We don't have to do this part when we're exactly getting ready to shut the pool down. We want to get the water perfectly balanced. So if all of you brought water samples in here before to have them test the water, this in the spring is probably the most important time to have them test the water. They'll run a thorough computerized water analysis. They'll check the pH, total alkalinity, calcium hardness. If you use optimizer in your pool, they'll check that level. They'll test for any metals in the water, cyanuric acid, total dissolved solids, a whole array of things, because we want to get that water perfectly balanced, because it's going to be in there, and you're probably not going to pay much attention to it for months. If the water isn't properly balanced, it can cause some damage to the pool, the plumbing, the equipment. Things like if the pH is low, it'll start to, if you've got a vinyl pool, it'll pull the plasticizers out of the vinyl. If it's a concrete pool, it'll etch the plaster. We typically have more issues with, because our water's pretty soft in the Northwest, we tend to have more problems with corrosion than we do scale. You go to other parts of the country, Idaho or Montana, where the water's real hard, they get more problems with scaling. We tend, because our water's so soft here, we tend to have more problems with corrosion. Come in. Thanks. So we want to get the water perfectly balanced. And these guys here at the Pool and Spa House will help you do that. And they'll give you, if you haven't done this before, they'll give you, it's a free test they do. They'll give you a recipe card, basically of what you need to do to get the water perfectly balanced. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is we want to get the water as clean as possible of debris. So what I'm talking about here is skimming the pool, make sure you got all the leaves out, vacuum the bottom of the pool, any debris that's in the pool. If you've got an automatic pool cleaner, get that to run around to clean up the pool. They do have, if you get a lot of leaves in the pool, I didn't bring one up here, but they've got it's called a leaf master. Ryan's going to grab that for me. This is a pretty slick device. If you get a lot of leaves in the pool where you don't want to vacuum it up with your normal pool vacuum, this is probably, what do these run, Ryan?
This one's about 75, 80 bucks.
Okay, so the way this works is you hook this into your telescopic pole, this end to the garden hose, and what it does, when you run water through here, it's got some little jets in here that spray up. So when this runs down on the bottom of the pool, it sucks all the leaves up. So this is a pretty if you get a lot of leaves in the pool, obviously you don't get a lot of leaves, you wouldn't need this, but if you get a ton of leaves, this is a pretty slick device, so you don't clog up your filter. Thanks, Ryan.
This one's actually pretty neat because it's battery operated.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You don't need your hose attached to it.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it rechargeable?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Thanks, Ryan. So we want to get the water as clean as possible. The whole idea here, we got the water perfectly balanced, clean as possible, so that when we put the winterizing products in, they last as long as possible. A couple of other things that we want to do as well, we want to clean the water line. So if you've got kind of a ring around the pool, a little bit of a scum line, we have a cleaner called Off the Wall that you put on a sponge or scrub brush. This is for all surfaces, whether it be vinyl, tile, it doesn't matter, fiberglass, it doesn't matter what kind of pool you have. We want to clean that water line. And sir, since you came in before I asked my question, what kind of filter do you have? Do you have a sand filter?
Yeah, sand filter.
And are you using chlorine in your pool?
That's the salt water.
Salt water, okay, that helps. So since all of you have sand filters, we want to chemically clean the sand. We recommend chemically cleaning the sand twice a year, but like in middle of July, and then when you winterize the pool. How many of you have ever chemically cleaned the sand? Anybody? So I guess one thing before I talk about that, typically the sand lasts about 5 years. That's typically the life of the sand, and people always ask, how am I going to know if my sand's bad? Is you're just not going to have super water quality during the summer. It's not going to be, the water should be crystal clear. You should be able to put a quarter on the bottom of the pool to tell if it's heads or tails. But if if you check your chlorine level and it's good, pH level is good, but the water's still kind of hazy, maybe you've got a light in your pool and you look around the light and it's got a little bit of, looks like little floating fuzzies in the water, probably need to change the sand or chemically clean the sand, because it's just not getting the water filtered out. So back on cleaning the sand. So we recommend twice a year. We use a product called Strip Quick. And doesn't matter if you're on chlorine or a salt system, we clean the filter with this. And the best way to do this, and I don't remember, Ryan, is there instructions in the handout on cleaning the sand?
Correct.
Okay, so there is instructions in there. So the best way to do this is you turn the pump off. You've all backwashed your filter before, right?
Yes.
So put the filter in the backwash position. So we've got pump off, filter in the backwash position. We're gonna pour this Strip Quick into the pump. You know, on the front of the pump, you've got that lid that you can open up that's got a little basket in it. We pour the Strip Quick into the pump, put the lid back on, turn the filter on for 30 seconds, turn the pump on for 30 seconds. That flushes this cleaner up through the bottom of the sand filter, shut it off, let it sit there for a couple of hours or overnight. That basically shampoos the sand and gets all that crud, greases, and oils that have been accumulating all summer, so that when you open up your pool next spring, the sand has been cleaned and you don't have all those, you know, suntan lotions and all that kind of gunk that's gotten into the filter. So this can really help, because one of the things, the reason this is so important is not so much for when you winterize, but for next spring. One of the things that really the chemicals keep chlorine and keep the pH, but if the filter's dirty, they won't work very well. So it's real important that we keep the filter clean. These other couple of filter cleaners are for some different systems. So Baleen Strip Quick and Off the Wall would be the products that we want to use. In your case, sir, with the saltwater system, we recommend chemically cleaning your cell. This is the best time of year to do that. And we'll use a cell cleaner, just called Saltscape Cell Cleaner. Have you ever inspected your cell?
It's brand new. So.
Okay. I would still inspect it, because typically, one of the things that happens, it's very common to get scale in that cell. This is the time of year that we want to chemically clean that to get that scale out of there. That's pretty common. This is what it should look like. We want to get that stuff cleaned out of there. So what you do with that, you disconnect the cell, there's a plug that you can put in one end of the cell. You pour that cleaner into the other end. You got it in a 5-gallon bucket, and just let it sit in there for 15-20 minutes, and it'll dissolve the scale off there. Okay, so we got the housekeeping chores done. We got the water perfectly balanced. Really, this is the main part of the chemical treatment, is we'll put a winter kit in. And this is called Arctic Blue Winter Kit 12. What that stands for is the number of gallons, 12,000 gallons. So that'll treat up to 12,000 gallons. So if you've got a 20,000 gallon pool, you put 2 kits in. If you've got an 8,000 gallon, you put the whole 12,000 gallon kit. This is the one step. Normally we don't recommend overdosing. This is one of the steps I would rather overdose than underdose. So if you've got a 20,000 gallon pool, it's 2 kits, 30,000 is 3 kits. And so what's in this kit is basically 2 products. The first product, this is called Arctic Blue Winter Shock. This is a long-lasting chlorine-based shock. It's got chlorine, non-chlorine shock, water clarifiers, pH buffers. It dissolves very fast and it oxidizes the water, burns out contaminants, but also establishes a very high chlorine level. That's what this step does to prevent bacteria growing over the winter. It's a 2-pound bottle. Each kit has 1 bottle in it. So we're gonna, for every 12,000 gallons, you put in 1 bottle, add it to the water with the pump and filter circulating for an hour, and then we go to the other product that's in the kit, which is a long-lasting preventative algicide. This is called Arctic Blue Algae Protector. It's a pint bottle, 1 pint per 12,000 gallons, or a quart per 24,000 gallons. This will prevent green algae, black algae, mustard algae. Those are the typical algae that we get in swimming pools. It'll prevent all of them, and then we're done. So that's basically it. I'm going to talk about one more product that helps prevent damage to the pool surfaces, plumbing, and equipment. But that's really it. Now, people always ask, how long is this kit gonna last? And that's the $1,000,000 question. It depends on a bunch of things. It depends on if the water was cold when you closed it. It depends on if the water was clean, you got all the debris out of it. And then it depends on if you're gonna cover the pool. So how many of you cover the pool? So some of you do, some of you don't. So if you don't cover the pool, which is perfectly fine, a lot of people don't cover the pool, it's not gonna last as long. So you may need to apply another kit, keep a little closer eye on it during the winter, maybe once a month, check the chlorine level, test the pH level, bring a water sample in to Katrina and her team here, because it's the rain, debris getting into the pool is gonna cause the kit to dissipate faster. And especially when we get into February and March, I mean, once the water temperature drops and we start getting cooler days, the chlorine's not gonna dissipate that quick. It's really when we get into February, March, we start to get some nice days, the water starts to warm up, that's when the chlorine goes away quicker. And the thing that we're looking for is when the chlorine level drops below 1 part per million, kind of a pinkish color on your test strips, that's when all the bad stuff happens, algae, bacteria. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you've got test strips, especially if you're leaving the pool uncovered, once a month, go dip your test strip in. If the chlorine level's good, you're good. If the chlorine level's starting to get close to 1, you might need to put another bottle of winter shock in. And so just keep an eye on it. It's really when the chlorine level goes away is when we get green algae. Mustard algae, we tend to get more when the chlorine level is 0. We tend to get that more during the summer. It's usually green algae that we get over the winter. So is it a couple of you that have a cover on, anybody use a mesh cover? No?
I have a mesh cover. I'm just new to everything, so
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna cover it for the winter, just like with a tarp. But we have the mesh cover too. It's one better than the other.
It is, so I'm gonna show some covers at the end. There's really 2 types of cover, mesh covers and solid covers. The reason I brought up the mesh, because the mesh does allow rain through and some fine debris. So from a chemistry standpoint, the kit's not gonna last quite as long as a solid cover, but it's gonna last longer than not covering the pool at all. Just do the same thing when we get into February or March, pull a corner of the cover back, dip your test strip in or bring in a water sample here to the store, and we can double check the levels just to make sure it doesn't turn green. And then really the last product, this is more to protect the pool surfaces, plumbing and equipment. This is called Pool Closing Complete. We put in 1 bottle up to 25,000 gallons. This has a corrosion inhibitor, a scale preventative, a stain preventative, also helps minimize any kind of a water line buildup that we get over the winter. This is basically to protect, kind of the final touch where we protect the pool surfaces, plumbing and equipment. So this is kind of the standard package. The winter kits, Pool Closing Complete, stripped quick to clean your filter, off the wall to clean the water line. Do any of you have a solar blanket you keep on the pool? No? No solar blankets?
A bubble thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those, you want to take that off. That's not designed as a winter cover. It's designed to keep the heat in and keep the chemicals during the summer from dissipating so quickly. So take that off. We can clean it. The stowaway on the right there, that's a cover cleaner, so it won't mold and mildew over the winter.
That's phony.
And nobody's on soft swim. This is a non-chlorine system, so I'm not going to talk about this. Some people use this particular system. Okay, so we just covered really everything you need to know from a chemistry standpoint about winterizing your pool. Any questions before I go into really the last thing, protecting freeze damage?
The pool closing complete, is that something that we would do as like the very last step? Do we
It
put in
is.
the filter at all?
Yeah, you still want to put that in with the pump and filter operating. Yep.
Okay.
And so, running the pump and filter is really the next thing that I'm going to talk about. When we talk about freeze protection, is we have basically 2 ways to do this. What we call the off-season pool care, like what we do in Western Oregon, Western Washington, where we don't get super freezing temperatures. You go over to Eastern Oregon or Eastern Washington, they winterize the pools a little bit differently over there, where they, in an in-ground pool, they'll drain the water down, they'll have the service company come out and blow the lines out, they get all the water out of the equipment. It's totally shut down. Here in Western Oregon, Western Washington, a lot of people just keep the pool filled up to the normal level. In fact, some people do. Any of you keep the pool running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year? Yeah, that's pretty common. So some people will do that. Some people will turn the pump off, but only run it when they watch the weather report that we're getting freezing temperatures. Because here's the key. We want to make sure that either we have two choices. We either winterize it like they do in Eastern Oregon, and like with your above ground pool, that's the beauty of those. You just drain the water down below the skimmer, disconnect the skimmer line, disconnect all the equipment. I don't know how big your equipment is. If you could even, sometimes people move the equipment into the garage so it's protected. You do that?
Yeah.
That's probably the best method. Now all you've got is a body of water. We don't care if the pool freezes. If it got so cold that you got a few inches of ice on the pool, no big deal. It's kind of like an ice tray. You know, you put water in the ice tray,
Yeah.
it freezes, it doesn't break the ice tray.
That's
Kind of-
fine, I guess that's my question, it would just expand with the ice, right? There wouldn't be anything it could damage.
No, the only thing it could damage, this would be the only caveat, is if it rained a lot, it snowed, and the water level got up, and then it expanded where it could maybe cause damage to the coping, right? Because if you got it filled up, especially an in-ground pool or even an above ground pool, if that water level got so high, it expanded up, it could take off the lip of the pool. That would be the only caveat. So it used to be, sometimes people used to throw logs in their pool so that when it froze, that the ice would kind of break up on the logs. We don't need to do that. And so we don't really need to put anything in. And now, especially with logs, now you're putting a big piece of organic material in there that's gonna put a lot of other crap in the pool, and so that's not good. So we don't need to worry about the pool freezing. So we have two choices, either to make sure the pump is running when we get freezing temperatures, or do like they do in Eastern Washington or Oregon, where they drop the level down. I would suggest what you guys have been doing in the past is perfect for above ground pool. Drop it below the skimmer, disconnect all the lines, put the equipment in the garage, you're done.
As far as running the pump, is that hard on the pump when you run it so long? Or are those things made to take that abuse?
They are made to take that. The only downside to running your pump is it's gonna cost you a few bucks at a well, I mean, they're designed to run all the time. I guess you're right. If you're gonna run it at all winter, I mean, running the pump is gonna shorten the life of the pump. So it's kind of the people that, like the gentleman in the back, he runs it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's pretty common. And so then you don't even have to worry about it. It's just always running. Even when the weather report, we get freezing temperatures, you're good. Except the only caveat would be is if we get like the perfect storm where we get freezing temperatures and a power outage, then you would need to go out and drain the water out of the equipment. And you'd have to want to make sure you do that. So I'm going to show some slides about that in just a second. So here, typically, people will keep the water level up, except in above ground pools, run the pump when you get freezing temperatures, or if you don't cover the pool, probably want to run it maybe even a few hours a day to keep any material that gets into the pool so we get that filtered out. That would be the only caveat there, because we don't want leaves and debris laying on the bottom of the pool, because those could leave a stain. So if you don't cover the pool, a little bit more maintenance involved, or you would want to be able to vacuum the pool periodically. And so the second option is like what they do in Eastern Oregon, where they know over there they're gonna have freezing temperatures a lot. They'll drain the water down below the skimmer, either remove the equipment. And so these next couple of slides show what they do over there. They'll even sometimes they'll drop the water level down below the returns, just to be sure they've got all the water evacuated. So what they'll do, then they'll hook a shop back up at the pump in the equipment area, blow all the lines. All the water is out of the plumbing lines. The only line that has water still in it is the main drain, if you have a main drain at the bottom of the pool. But they still blow enough air to knock that water level down, kind of like get a water in a straw to push that water down in the main drain line, so it would never freeze. And so, and then what they'll do is they'll put a plug in that hole so that when we get rain or snow, when the water level comes up, no water gets into that plumbing line. This is probably the most foolproof method of freeze protection. And then the other area would be, we need to protect the skimmer. So when water gets into the skimmer, if it's not circulating, it freezes, it expands, and then you break the skimmer. And especially in an in-ground pool, you're talking about having to chip up deck and that kind of thing. So we definitely want to avoid that. In fact, what they'll do is they'll, below the lines, they'll actually pour some RV antifreeze in here as well, and then they screw that little blue thing that you see, that screws down into the skimmer, so that when water does get in there, that absorbs the expansion, so it won't break the skimmer. And then we have to drain all the water out of the equipment. That's draining the water out of the filter. Typically, there's one drain plug. Drain the water out of the pump. Like in your above ground pool, you're just going to disconnect the lines, put everything away. So that's really easy there. Does anybody else with in-ground pools shut their pool down this way? Anybody else do this?
The previous owner had done this instead of just running the filter.
Yeah.
Because we do live in an area that will get a lot of power outages, so is that the more recommended thing for getting a lot of power outages?
If you want to have the peace of mind, you're worried about power outages and that perfect storm of that week or two of freezing temperatures, this would probably be the better way to go. And then you'd not have to worry about it at all. Nothing, I mean, truly nothing can happen to it. Because the main things we're concerned with is the water in the equipment and maybe some of the plumbing lines that are closer to the top of the surface that could potentially freeze and expand. If you do this method, so like in the case where you're putting your equipment in the garage or wherever, on your sand filter, you want to make sure you put it in between. There's some sand filters have a winter setting on them. If you don't have that, a lot of filters don't, but if you don't have the winter setting, you want to put it in between a setting, so it's not sitting on the gasket inside there, because that'll be hard on the gasket. Again, this is only if you're going to do this method. Then you turn the power off to the pump, turn the heat off to the heater. So a little bit more complicated, but you don't have to worry at all about turning the pump on when we get those freezing temperatures. Any questions on the freeze protection? So really the last thing is covering the pool. And so there's there's two types of covers, solid covers and mesh covers. These are solid covers. This is an above ground solid cover. This is an in-ground solid cover that's held down by water tubes. From a chemistry standpoint, these are probably the best covers because they don't allow anything in to disrupt the winterizing chemicals that we're putting in. The downside is now you get a pool on top of a pool where you can get some of that crap on there, and so you probably need to have a cover pump where you pump the water off periodically, and so a little bit more work, and you want to make sure the cover's installed properly, because what ends up happening, sometimes people don't put these on properly. You want the cover to go out the deck, straight down the wall, lay on top of the water up the other side, where they get it too tight, and then it rains and it pulls the whole cover and all the crap on top of the cover into the pool and just defeated the whole purpose. So if you do a solid cover, make sure you get it installed properly. There's a couple of different types of mesh covers. This is a mesh safety cover. On the right there's some mesh tarp covers as well. These work pretty good, especially in areas where we get a lot of rain, like the Northwest, where it doesn't allow rainwater through. Some fine debris, but you don't have that problem of the pool on top of the pool. So a lot of people do use these covers, especially people that have children. They like these because you can actually walk across this cover, so you don't have to worry about kids falling in, that type of thing. And then there's also automatic covers. Some in-ground pools have an automatic cover. Does anybody have an automatic cover? No? Okay. And then if you don't cover the pool, and a lot of people don't cover the pool, you just need to be aware that you wanna be able to vacuum it periodically, test the chlorine level and the pH level on a monthly basis, just to stay ahead of it. Any questions?
I just had a question
Yeah.
about, so when I close the pool, obviously it's gonna be closed for the winter.
Yep.
And just running it, I know we talk about running it, periodically for winterization for freezing. But there's also times when you have to run it, I would imagine, just during the off season.
There would be, so are you gonna leave it uncovered?
Yeah,
So if you're gonna leave it uncovered, do you have a time clock on it where you could set a timer to have it run a certain amount of time?
I don't have a time clock on it, but, you know, I could put one on there, but,
So if you, and that's not 100%, I was just trying to think of ease of maintenance, but that if you could run it, at least a few hours a week,
okay,
mainly to keep the water clean.
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
few hours, okay.
Yeah, and then watch the weather report when we start getting freezing temperatures, then run it 24 hours a day
Okay,
until, that
temperature comes up,
temperature comes up.
okay.
And you'll kind of know, do you get a lot of debris in your pool?
No,
So-
not, only on windy days,
Okay, so then run the pump.
yeah,
Run the pump when you get debris in there, because the main thing we're concerned with is stuff laying on the bottom of the pool that could stain it.
right,
That's the main thing. I mean, if you got a little bit of dirt in the pool, big deal,
Yeah.
but we just don't want a bunch of stuff laying in the bottom that could stain it. And that's really it. It's, like I said, it's not that complicated, just one last time, just make sure you start checking the water February, March, if we start getting some good weather. This year was probably a good example of, we had not a great spring, right? It seemed like we couldn't really, Memorial Day, which is typically the kickoff of pool season, it rained. The 4th of July, which is usually a good weekend to get pool use, was not that hot. A lot of people didn't get their pools going and start using them much until June and July. The winter kit is not gonna last that long. And so there was a lot of people this spring that opened up to the Green Monster, and we definitely want to avoid that from happening. And so a little bit of preventative maintenance in the spring, you might have to put another bottle of winter shock in. Even you folks draining the water down, if you check the chlorine level and it's low, you can add chlorine to the pool without it circulating. You just pull a corner of the cover back, mix up some winter shock in a bucket, pour it into the pool, get your brush out. All you need is a little bit of water circulation to get it moved to the other area of the pool. Boom, you're done. And so sometimes people think that if the pump's not able to run, you can't treat the water. You can. Like I said, over in eastern Washington, where people, blow the lines out, do all that, they'll pull a corner of the cover back, pre-dissolve some winter shock, throw it in, and they're good for another month or two. So. Yes, sir.
Last year I did the winterization with the box of chemicals, and then there was like a floaty edition.
Yes, the floater, because of supply chain challenges, is not available this year.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked about that. So that kept a little trickle of chlorine going in all winter and
Yeah,
helped
okay.
with that. So without having that, it might even be worth, so let's say you had a 20,000 gallon pool, it might be worth buying 3 kits. Having 2 to put in now and 1 to have ready if you check the water in February or March next year, you put that, basically you're putting another half a dose in. It might be worth having a 3rd kit to help compensate for not having that floater. Anything else?
Is there any time when the heater needs to be back on? Because once I turn that heater off, it's off.
No, there is not, unless you wanted to use the pool.
Okay.
And then be prepared for the bill. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because I know sometimes people decide to turn the heater on in December and then they get that bill in January and they just about fall over.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, no, but you're right, there's no need to turn it on.
Okay.
Yep.
We have a customer with a 30,000 gallon pool. Tried turning his pool on, the heater on in May. Had a $1,500 gas bill.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you all for coming. We'll be around for any questions that you might have. We're obviously open if you need any supplies. Thank you very much for coming. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, you're welcome.